Rebecca, welcome to Art and Cocktails. I'm so excited to chat with you about your beautiful work. And you were recently in our magazine issue, and it's just so fun to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. I feel like the first time we spoke was so long ago, and it's so nice to actually get a chance to talk to you again after so long.
Absolutely. I feel like 20 years has gone by in the past 4 years.
Yeah, and since that time, I think I've watched you, your career has been just skyrocketing, and I'm so proud and happy to see that.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so proud of you. And I am so excited to chat about your work. And I've been a fan of your work for forever. And I absolutely adore everything you're creating, including this morning. I shouldn't do this, but I woke up and I scrolled and I saw your beautiful new book. So before we dive into all the magic literally that you're creating, could you tell our listeners a tiny bit about yourself, just for those who may not know you and your work yet?
Sure, yeah. My name is Rebecca Chaperon. Sort of sounds like chaperone, but no E at the end. And I'm an artist who's living and working in Vancouver, BC, Canada. And I do have a formal art education. But I would say that after school is kind of when most of the magic happens anyway, because you really have to find your own motivation to kind of propel yourself forward and find your own really unique kind of voice. So I've been out of school since 2002. So I've had a lot of time to kind of develop my art and develop my vocabulary and kind of really follow my own guidance creatively rather than worry about external pressures. So, that's something that I feel super happy to have achieved. And I wish that for other artists too, because I know there's so much pressure out there.
100%. I would love to dive into that more in a moment. I think that's like the biggest plague for us artists. There's so many challenges, of course, from how to sustain ourselves to social media, but I think the pressure is the worst of all of them. And I would absolutely love to hear your tips on that in just a moment. And if I forget, please remind me to come back to this. I want to quickly talk about your work because when I first discovered it, and I think this was back through the Jealous Curator, I think was the first time I seen your work, and I've just been following you since. And your work includes a lot of magic, otherworldly, sometimes actual portals, and sometimes things that feel like a portal when you're looking at them. And lately, witches and kind of more mystical elements. Can you talk a little bit about what drives you to paint and what are some messages and meanings inside your beautiful paintings?
Yeah, so I think the motivation often comes from wanting to kind of tell stories and kind of express these kind of ideas and feelings that are a little bit often like a mix of positive and negative kind of aspects of being a human. And I do like to throw hints of humor that in there as well. So it just kind of makes it a little bit more digestible. So I think that's where most of my kind of motivation comes from, as far as just trying to bring something that feels really authentic to other people and kind of create this framework of a story through which, so my work is quite narrative. There's often figures and landscapes, and you really get a sense of a place and something happening. So, I always say that if I wouldn't have been a artist, I would have probably decided to go into creative writing. I just have to say the sound here is a little bit noisy today.
You're fine.
Yeah,
We're getting the behind the scenes experience.
that's fine. Because
Love
I
it.
find a quieter and quieter place to talk to you.
No, you're totally fine. Well, I'm really excited because I can totally see how you would easily translate to a writer. I mean, even today, have you ever written anything because I feel like your paintings are basically like each one has a potential of being a whole story.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I do dabble quite a bit, so I do write little stories for my paintings. So usually what happens is I'll make some work and then I will write little creative pieces in response to those. So it gives me a chance to flex that muscle a little bit, but by no means am I an excellent writer. And sometimes I almost feel a little bit cheeky, kind of putting that stuff out there because I don't really have like a, my grammar is pretty terrible, to be honest.
Well, we have so many tools now, we don't even need to worry about that anymore.
Yeah, I should probably use those tools. Yeah, I did do like a book, but there wasn't much writing in it. My book Eerie Diaries, which came out in 2014, and that was like it's structured like an ABC book. It's basically a picture book, so it's got lots of artwork in it, and then it goes through each letter of the alphabet as a way to potentially be missing school. So I got to illustrate all these like schoolgirls who are kind of like, doing all these crazy things or just sick in bed at home. So that it's kind of funny actually because that series it's something I'm kind of coming back to with the new books that I'm working on now because all of the images in Eerie Diaries were um, like the illustrations were done on old book covers. And so now I'm kind of returning to that passion of working with old book imagery.
I love it. They're beautiful and I love old books also. Would you say your aesthetic comes from literature or old books? Because some of the colors, especially in like the witchy paintings, like they remind me of that greenish like, book
Yeah.
cover. And I love that.
I really like, I know I do have like those bright pastel kind of colorscapes in a lot of my work, especially like the older portal paintings. But I really love muddy colors. And sometimes I look at finished work and I'm like, wow, it's a lot darker than I realized. Colors are quite dim looking. But I think there's something kind of like soothing about looking at work like that sometimes. So I think it just appeals to me and probably to people who like my work as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so stunning. And I love that. I was reading a little bit today about the bogs, and I do love that aesthetic. You know, when I was growing up in Russia, we had a story about like this girl going into the forest and like I was always warned about the dangers of the bog. And it's
Mhm.
not so much a thing here where I'm living now in the Northeast, but in Russia, bogs were scary. But there is
Yeah.
some magic and mystery. Like, what's in there? What,
I mean, I think there's like, maybe part of that weird fear or like those narratives around bogs has to do with the fact that they found preserved people in there like, that have been there for a really long time. It's sort of one of those magical and terrifying kind of aspects of bog life, I guess, and bog.
The bog core. I
Yeah.
love it so much. Let me ask you this. So you, when I first got introduced to your work, it was a lot of landscapes and like you said, those pastel colors. And I love both of those aesthetics that you create. Was there a learning curve for you when you started adding the witchy figures and some of these mystical characters, or were you trained in school and you were pretty comfortable? Because sometimes I feel like when an idea comes to us, we don't always have the skills right away and we kind of find them. I'm just curious how your process was going into this body of work.
Yeah, I think actually you touched on something that is like it's been a big thing for me through just like being creative was that when I first started with the figure, I was always, I graduated from art school and at that time like pop surrealism was huge and all those artists like Mark Ryden and people like that and like there was sort of this dull like aesthetic and I was like consuming that stuff like crazy and so of course it kind of came out in my work too but there came this point where I was like I don't want to be making my figures kind of look like this and so in 2011 I had a series called Great Black Fire and in all of the images there are these figures but they have their faces obscured because it was like that last hurdle of like I can't figure out like how these people should be identified. I kind of wanted to make them more serious but I hadn't kind of found this way that I now make faces where it's sort of like a cross between old illustration so there's some flat lines that sort of defining eyes and things like that like that and this weird like really rounded kind of doll like face and the work in that series was kind of about identity anyway so it kind of made sense to be obscuring the faces in all these really crazy ways like one scene they all have these pyramids over their faces or this like rainbow colored fire over their bodies so then I think I kind of did a lot of landscape stuff and portals, and strangely there wasn't a lot of figures in there because it's kind of working it out. And then I started making these pieces that I kind of call goth fauve. They were like fauvism, so you're using colors that don't really belong in those places. Um, but the figures themselves, I think using the paint in those weird ways helped me also be weird about developing how the figures could look and how their expressions could be kind of like rendered. And so those pieces is kind of where it started to work. I was like, oh, I kind of see how this like can work for me, and I can make the figures my own. And I just think like, although I love the landscapes with just the floating shapes in them and those kind of things, there's something about when you want to tell a story, having figures there is really helpful to kind of like bring people into these things that are happening, right?
100%. I can relate because I paint figures sometimes for public, but for personal projects, I dabble and I have like I'm still figuring out what they actually want to look like. Do you have any resources? I know when I started, one of my mentors recommended that I do master copies of like old illustrations, like you mentioned, or old even master paintings. Do you have any tips for how someone can ease into a new style or a new subject matter,
Yeah.
to fulfill their vision? Because we all get new ideas, right?
I think that, I mean, there's just a lot of visual resource at our fingertips. The internet is insane. But I think that I think the only thing I would really say around that is like, doing something like having Pinterest boards, that kind of thing is super helpful. It's really easy to do, and you can collect things that you like or you're drawn to, but maybe you don't exactly know why. You're like, I don't really like this whole thing, but there's something about the nose on that figure that's really cool. And I think that can be really helpful. But, the only caveat I'll say is that you should consume a lot. Don't just like find an artist whose figures you like and look at lots of those, because inevitably you're going to start making the same thing. Like it just
And no one
doesn't.
wants that.
No, and it can happen very innocently where you're just consuming a lot of that stuff, and then like lo and behold, you sit down to make something and it feels like it's coming from you. But if all you've been consuming is looking at tons of art by one artist, then you're kind of like making their work, which is complicated.
Oh, yes. Thank you for bringing that up. That's such a good point. And it, like you said, it happens
Mhm.
innocently. It doesn't happen like with malicious intent, but I think it's so important to be aware and also remember we're a sponge and
Yeah.
we will absorb whatever we're consuming, whether it's information or visual. So I love that reminder. And thank you for sharing your process and being honest about that, because I think so many times someone will see your beautiful work and it looks polished. It looks done. It
Mhm.
looks like your work. And it's easy to assume that one day you just picked up your brush and there was nothing behind
Yeah,
it. You just came out like a genius. And
absolutely.
that would be amazing if that happened. But I know for most of us, there's a bit of a journey to get there, right?
Yeah, one more thing I will say about that is I have this process where I'll think of the figure that I want to draw, and I draw it on tracing paper. And I make it, and it usually looks really bad. The proportions are off, everything is off. And I just take another piece of tracing paper and I put it over top. So this is because I don't really use references for the figures. I'm coming up with these things on my own, kind of pulling on like my memories of stuff. So I go through this process with the tracing paper, and it actually works really well for developing your own stuff, because you won't be looking at something trying to be like, oh, how do
Oh,
I make the arms look right? You're
I'm gonna
kind of
try that.
you just kind of make your blobby arms or whatever, then you layer on another piece of tracing paper and you correct it. And through that editing process, you will make something, I think, pretty unique.
I absolutely love that. Do you also come up with your own landscapes too? Is that stuff out of your
Yes.
imagination? I
Yeah.
love it. So you just let it, do you have like a warm up aside from the tracing paper before you sit down to start the painting on canvas or board or a book? What is the process like, if you don't mind me asking? This is so fascinating. I'm so glad
Oh,
I'm
it's so interesting. I think because like we as artists, we are often so used to doing our own process, right? So then we're just like, oh, obviously this is boring and everyone does it this way, but not at
No,
all.
this is the best.
Yeah, I do generally just I paint backgrounds. So if I'm not really sure what I'm doing or whatever, that becomes part of the warm up, like you said. And so I'll paint the backgrounds, and then as I'm working on the backgrounds, often I start to get a feel for like the shape of the surface and like what how the composition might be good, and like it gives me a chance to kind of like compose it a little bit in my mind. And then I will take, sometimes I'll take drawings. I might put in like a bit of like landscape stuff just out of my mind. And then I'll start putting drawings of the more detailed things on my tracing paper. I'll kind of hover them around and see compositionally where they might look good. That's kind of how I put things together. And as I go, I keep drawing more stuff and adding that in. So I can build the composition that way.
Oh, fascinating. Thank you so much for taking us behind the scenes of that. And I'm going to look at your work differently because now I'm going to see through all
Yeah,
the layers and
exactly.
steps. I love it. I'm going to switch gears just for a moment. And I want to talk something that you mentioned at the beginning when we started chatting is like the freedom that you have and you are really in tune with your own vision. The things you create are from you, from your imagination, even directly. Can you talk a little bit about balancing that with the business side? Because supporting ourselves, putting ourselves out there, and obviously like making sure we have enough for our bills, you can get a little bit, there can be some of that feeling of pressure for artists. Are there any tips that you have for separating yourself or balancing those two sides as you go about?
Yeah, I think, so far I've kind of handled it a bit organically. So I'll be working on paintings for a while. I'm like, oh, I have like a bookkeeper. That's something I recommend. I have a
100%.
bookkeeper. So I only give her my content every quarter. So I know I need to stop because I have a deadline. I need to make sure she has all the bits and pieces every quarter. So like there's kind of like a quarterly flow, I would say, because I know every quarter I need to stop what I'm doing and do that. But like you said, there's so many aspects, right? There's the marketing that takes so long, and I'm not really represented by any galleries. So I'm doing all that on my own. I I actually enjoy that work. I kind of use it as a way to be very creative as well. And but it is really time consuming. And I think I'm not the best person to tell you how to do it and not burn out. I haven't quite found like the perfect balance of doing it myself, and it is some long hours sometimes. But I think that what I figured out is that the best way to balance it is you take those vacations, you take that week off, and go do something else. Because for me, I can't really take a week off and be at home and be having a nice calm time.
No.
No.
It's so funny. My boyfriend always gets mad at me, and thank you so much for being honest and sharing that. It's a real thing. I have to get away because at home, even though I have a studio now, I'm so grateful for that, but I still see stuff that reminds me of work. I cannot be at rest here. There's nothing that you can, like my dog and going on a walk with my dog is the only thing that gets my mind off, but I can't just perpetually walk around outside. So I hear you. I think even changing the environment like, an hour away, even going to a state park like 30 minutes away can be so helpful for our mental
Yeah.
just refresh,
Yeah, my best
reset.
friend lives out of town, and so in order to, spend time with her, probably every other month I go and stay at her house, and like we just like sloth and we eat snacks and we watch a lot of true crime documentaries, and it's really wonderful because, we can kind of bring that to each other. That's one of the benefits of friendship is having someone that can like be your relaxation buddy, I think. It kind of keeps you accountable for not working, right?
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. It's so important. And I think, especially when I first became a full-time creative person, I really struggled with taking breaks because everything was so fun. And I don't know if you had this challenge too. I think now that I'm older and I've been doing it for a while, like I know I'm getting tired and I can sense like I need to stop. I need to go do something.
Mhm.
But when I first started, I would just want to work forever because it was the coolest thing on earth. And you realize, like, okay, I have no life, I have no hobbies outside
Yeah.
of work. I am like a shell of a person at this point, but
Yeah. Yeah. One of my clients told me last night that she had gotten into synchronized swimming. She's in a synchronized swimming group and they have a name and they're like cool and they do, and I'm like, oh my goodness, she is a really busy person and she found time to do this thing. And it's not like they're perfect and like, pristine about it and like trying to be Olympic level, but they're having fun and being in the water. And I'm like, oh man, like that is a dream of mine to find time to do a hobby that's like really a hobby. Not something that I'm trying to be good at, I guess. Yeah.
Same here. This right there with you. I got a surfboard. It's actually right. Oh, see, yeah, it's right there. So
Really?
I started taking surf lessons last year. I'm terrible. I barely got on a board once, but to your point, I'm not trying to become a professional surfer. I just need something to do other than work or
Yeah.
try to work on my business. So it's so important for us. And I think people, I never knew this was a situation for creative people when I was working a day job because like all I wanted to do was work on my business. But then you realize once you're there, like you spend a lot of time alone too. So like I'm really happy to hear that you're visiting your friend and making time for those relationships and outside outside of work.
So critical. Because otherwise, I think you can become quite weird, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we need ideas for our work too. Like we have a lot inside and I know for you you pull a lot from within, but even then like I'm sure you get like even watching true crime, I'm sure you get like a little nugget of something that might come through.
Can you imagine? Yeah, I mean, I think it's also another aspect is just relaxing the brain, and then when you come back to the studio or you come back to work, it feels really fresh again, and it feels very like exciting again because it can become quite boring after like 10 years, right?
Yep. Yep.
Oh,
100%.
if I just keep grinding away at my creativity, then like, I will make it boring for myself. It can become drudgery, right?
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that point. No one realizes this because I think most of the time, I think once you're at a certain point, you've done it for enough time, you start to have these moments. But when you talk to someone who's like working on the beginning of their dream, they don't even understand what you're saying. What do you mean? You should be grateful. I am, but I'm also a person. And it's so interesting. Let me ask you this, a little bit of a subject change, but obviously still about you. For our listeners, like a lot of our listeners are either, maybe they're trying to find a gallery or maybe they want to be independent. Like, obviously someone like Ashley Longshore is 100% committed to representing herself. And it's really inspiring. There's so many different ways to be an artist. For someone who's looking to represent themselves like you are, do you have any tips for how you market your work or do you have like a sale every so often? What is your frequency like when it comes to sales? And I asked this similar question to all my guests just because I love hearing all
Mhm.
the different ways we can approach our art businesses.
Yeah, I think so. Let's start with sales and then talk about the marketing. That was the first part.
Yeah.
So the sales, I think like I probably do it sort of depends. I've got two parts of my business. I got painting and I got prints. Those are the main parts of my business, right? There's some other little things, but those are the main things. So prints I will do more sales on because I don't really actually promote them much on my marketing plan. So, it gives me a chance to do that. But here's the thing about sales. Do we really need a reason sale to promote our
No.
stuff? And I think that can
No.
be a crutch in a way, right? Because we can say like, oh, I got to make it exciting for people so that they'll come and buy something. It's well, then just talk about it. It doesn't have to be a sale. So sales can be good
100%.
because it kind of gives you a chance to like feel excited and feel like you're offering something. It's kind to do a sale. It is generous to do a sale. So, put yourself in that headspace. I will do like a few print sales a year, maybe like three, something like that. When it comes to paintings, I may do one a year. I also might not do any in a year. So that really kind of depends on how I'm feeling about my inventory. If it feels like I'm worried and I need to hold on to it, sometimes that can kind of change the way but if you have a lot of old work and you want to do a sale, you can do that. Whatever
You're
you,
talking about discounting work, right?
discounting work.
Yeah. It's funny because I actually like I when I say sale, and this is something I realized a few years ago, I don't even say discount. I just mean like offering it to the
Yeah.
world. And it's funny because everyone assumes like, oh, you must massively discount and like take a loss on it, but not necessarily, right? You don't have to offer that discount. I'm glad you brought that up. It's not necessary, especially for originals, because that's all you have. That's there's only like
Yeah.
one of each.
You spend so much time thinking about pricing and getting that all together. So it's like, if you're doing a sale all the time, it's sort of like, do you really believe in that pricing? Or,
Mhm.
so I think, like, so you, when you're talking about sales, you're talking about like how to get sales. Is that,
Yeah,
yeah.
whatever.
Well, okay.
Because
I think then like that goes like more with your marketing question, right? I think that no matter what you decide to do for marketing as an artist, it should really be your style and your voice. That's the huge advantage of not being represented by a gallery is that you can actually like have a lot of creative control over the way that you're talking about your work and making it available to people. You can be playful if that's your style and your personality, or you can be really serious. You could be kind of poetic. You can come at it from the point of activism, like if your work touches on certain issues. So I think there's like a lot, but I think it's just don't try something on that is not really you. And you know when
100%.
you do it, right? Because it doesn't feel great. And the people that follow you have a sense of who you are and what your interests are. And they have the same interests, right?
I
So,
love that.
and it's,
100%. And a lot of times, I'm sure you experience this too, where you don't even actively, when right now I'm getting ready for a bunch of shows with galleries, but when I sell my work directly on my own, sometimes I'll just be sharing my stuff and I'm really excited about it. And someone will just naturally be interested in it because they can feel your energy and like your connection to that piece. So sometimes it's not even like an official thing where you're like, I'm going to go sell my work now, but like someone will just reach out anyway.
yeah, I think that that comes from that part is almost like your the structure you have set up that's like ready to sell. So what is your website? How many clicks does it take for people to get to stuff? How is it organized? All that kind of stuff can lead to a slightly more passive sale where people can kind of stumble upon your stuff and it's all ready to go. They don't really need to, I think anytime people have to reach out and ask questions, it's kind of like then that part is maybe needs some work, right?
Make it super easy. Like you don't even I like talking to people who buy my art especially, but
Mm.
it's nice when they can just go and just get it.
Yeah.
They don't need me there.
For bigger pieces, it's tougher because like the pricing of shipping is also like a big issue. You don't know if they're in another country or how much it's going to cost for that size of painting to go
Yeah.
somewhere. So I don't really sell a lot of bigger pieces online. I have them available, but I those ones I kind of have set up through Artwork Archive. So
Nice.
people can see them there. They can put in a request and message me through that piece on that site. So it's a little bit of a different process. You do have to talk to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dealing with shipping anything over like 4 feet is a whole thing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It still
So
makes me nervous to this day.
oh my gosh, me too. I have a big show coming up in April and it's gonna be a bunch of big stuff and I'm booking the like it's now February and I'm already booking the movers because it's like I just need to know that
Yeah.
everything's okay.
Where's your
Otherwise I won't
show?
sleep for 3 months.
Where,
Oh, sorry, what'd you say?
where's your show?
So well, don't even ask me what's going on. There's a lot, but the first one is in at the Painting Center in New York City, so that's exciting. It's a group of ladies that invited me. It's like they're members, and we're gonna have like a nice show together. So it's really cool. Community is like
Very
really
cool.
nice too. It's like just connecting with others through exhibitions is really why I do it. Not so much for the business side, but for the
Mm,
community and connection side, which I love.
yeah.
My gosh, Rebecca, well,
Yeah.
tell me about these new paintings because I saw them this morning and I have questions. Where did the inspiration for the? I know you mentioned you kind of were painting on books, and now they look like books, which is so
Yeah,
cool. Can you tell us
exactly.
about your new work?
Yeah, so I just yesterday launched, and I think I sold almost all of them, which is
Congrats.
amazing.
It's amazing.
expecting that at all. So that was great. But yeah, so I launched this series of book paintings. So just to describe them visually, it'll be like, some of them are these little kind of like almost like a bookshelf with a bunch of books kind of stacked. And then there's these like little ghostly hands kind of like leaning against the shelf. I was kind of thinking about like the writer's presence, kind of lurking around the books. And I took a lot of time. I love old books, so I took so much time just like detailing all of the book spines and coming up with the color combinations and things like that. And then some of the books in that series are panels that I painted to look like books, which is not a totally unique idea. There's other artists who also do something similar, but I kind of chose like I invented these book titles that are like the ancient history of the Bog Witch. So the panel it's painted to look like a book. So the side has just Bog Witch on the spine, and then it's got the title across the front, and then like a little illustration. I really love like I have a Pinterest board that's just old books, and I love the combination of like scale of type and matched with like illustration and tight. Like sometimes when it's like a little wonky even or whatever, and like scuffed. So I tried to bring that into the painting of these panels. And then like the other three edges are painted as though it's like the pages inside the book, right, with the lip of the cover. I kind of went crazy on making them look like books. And then when I went to photograph them, I was like, huh, people are just going to think these are books. Like, I don't know how to like show. It's funny because I have a friend who does like super realistic pet portraits, and I'm like, that's a problem when you come to share that on something like Instagram, because people are like, oh, it's a photo of an animal, right, or a photo of a book, and they don't really see immediately that it's a painting. So I'm like, will people be people who are new to my work, are they gonna be like, I don't get it? Yeah.
They're so cool. I mean they look real, but they also have something that looks special that lets you know,
Mhm.
not directly, but I could see how it is your work, but it's magical.
Yeah. Well,
Congratulations.
I haven't put in any like by Rebecca Chaperon as the text on the book. I mean, I think that's a good clue. There's no author name on there, but thank you. Yeah, I'm really happy about them.
Oh my gosh, amazing. What else do you have going on this year? How can we support you? And where can our listeners find you and see, maybe even see your work somewhere?
Yeah, so you can go to rebeccachaperon.com. My last name is spelled with a C-H, A-P. Sometimes people like to put an S in there. And that will lead you to basically my shop, but then it's got links to everything. I have a Patreon, which I've just revamped this January. I'm sending out these like little witchy letters to my Patreon people,
Ooh.
along with like stickers and stuff like that. But the letters are going to include like writing from writers that I know. So I'll be writing the letter and then I'll like pop in like poems and things like that from some of my friends. So I'm really excited about that. I have a show that's coming up in 2025, which I know seems like,
No, it's already flying. It's already.
yeah, but it's a special kind of show. So it's going to be showing in Canada. We have like artist run centers. It's like a public gallery, so they get the funding from, the government. And so the type of show that I can do with them is one that's kind of quite, I can get kind of theoretical. I can do some installations. I can really develop some like ideas that are not around pieces that I'm designing for sale. So, there will be some installations and things like that going on for that. It's called Mortal Magic.
I love
And so, yeah, I'm already working with the curator. We're kind of like getting the ball rolling, and we plan like a lot of public engagement projects around the show. So there'll be like a lot of stuff going on for that. And all the
exciting.
pieces in that series are based on this writing project I did with Kate Horowitz. She's a writer who lives in Maine. And we basically like decided to create a short story between the two of us, but we wrote letters back and forth in the mail in character as these two witches that were like trying to help each other kind of do stuff and sending each other like spells and things like that. So pulling some of like the imagery from those stories, I'm going to be like making some of the sculptures of some of the things we talked about in those stories.
I
Yeah.
cannot wait to see. It's going to be so cool. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, this was such a pleasure, Rebecca. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing with us your process, your magic. And I'm so excited to see your sculptures. That's going to be epic.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.